I just wired $330,000 to my son, Colin Dawson. The transfer confirmation was still glowing on my screen, a silent testament to a mother's unshaken faith. I picked up my phone and dialed his number, my voice calm and light. Colin, I just sent it. Make sure Vanessa gets good supplements, all right? She needs to stay strong. And the baby, too. He chuckled, his tone warm and casual, like we were still living in a world where love meant something. Of course, Mom. I'm going to be a dad now. You better believe I'll take care of her and our little bundle of joy. I felt myself smile. Foolish, maybe, but it was nice to believe. I was about to say something else, just a simple, I love you, when he cut me off. All right, Mom, gotta run. Got some stuff going on over here. Click. No thanks. Not even a pause. I stared at the phone for a moment, still holding on to the silence like it meant something. Then I heard it. Finally, the old woman sent the money. Vanessa's voice. I didn't even realize I hadn't hung up yet. My breath caught. She's too damn cautious, Colin said, his voice lower, meaner. We had to fake a pregnancy just to get that money. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, my heart screaming while my body sat perfectly still. They laughed. And just like that, every birthday, every scraped knee, every sleepless night spent worrying about him crumbled like brittle old paper. I had been a fool. Colin had always been reckless with money. When he was younger, it was video game consoles, sneakers, and new phones. When he got older, it was poker tables and fantasy sports leagues. I bailed him out every single time. Tens of thousands of dollars. One time, he racked up such a big debt, I had to sell off my emergency retirement stock. He cried back then. He held my hands and told me I'd saved his life, and I believed him, because that's what mothers do. We believe. We want to believe. This time, though, I had let my guard down completely, because he said Vanessa was pregnant, and because, well, I wanted to be a grandmother. I really did. The idea of a new little life felt like a chance to finally get something right. But the truth? The truth was colder than anything I'd ever faced. They didn't need me. They needed my money. 2 days later, there was a knock at my door. When you live alone long enough, a knock feels strange, like a foreign sound in your own home. I opened it. There he was, Colin, smiling wide like a toothpaste ad. Vanessa stood beside him, hair perfectly curled, holding a reusable shopping bag. "Hey, Mom," he said, all casual charm. "Thought we'd drop by, see how you're doing." Vanessa held up the bag. "We brought supplements. You need to stay healthy, Helen." My name. Not Mom. Not Mother. Helen. I laughed inwardly. What a show they were putting on. And if they wanted to act, I'd give them the performance of a lifetime. "Oh, how thoughtful," I said, my voice soft as rose petals. "Come on in." They settled in like they owned the place. And maybe, in their minds, they did. We sat in the living room, sipping tea I didn't offer. Colin leaned forward and tapped the armrest beside me. "You know, Vanessa's pregnant. The apartment we're in, way too cramped. We were thinking, maybe we could move in with you for a while." He said it like it was an afterthought, like it hadn't been rehearsed 100 times on the drive over. Vanessa sighed, placing her hand dramatically on her stomach. "It's just so tight in there, and I'm worried, for the baby." I nodded slowly. "Of course." Colin's eyes lit up. He pressed forward. "And maybe, since we'll be here anyway, you could put the house in my name, just to make handling taxes and stuff easier. Maintenance, too. Vanessa chimed in sweetly. "We'd take such good care of it for you. You've done enough. Time to relax." I stared at them, heart quiet, smile steady. "Sure," I whispered. Vanessa blinked. Colin paused. They hadn't expected that. They thought I'd resist. They were prepared for a fight, not a quiet, easy yes. And that's exactly why I gave it to them. Go on, I thought. Keep dancing. Let's see how far you'll take this. Welcome home, dearest parasites. It's funny, isn't it? When you say yes to someone who expects a no, their whole rhythm falls apart. That's exactly what happened after I agreed to let Colin and Vanessa move in and even offered to transfer the house. They didn't know yet that the papers I handed them were about as legally binding as a napkin doodle. From the moment they wheeled their oversized suitcases into my entryway, the energy in the house changed. It wasn't anything loud or sudden. No slamming doors or shouting matches. It was the quiet shift in ownership. They walked in like hosts, not guests. Vanessa floated around the kitchen like a queen inspecting her new palace. "This space could use a little renovation," she said brightly, running her manicured hand along my granite countertop. "Maybe a touch of marble, something more modern." I sipped my tea, nodding thoughtfully. "Of course, dear, whatever you think is best." And just like that, I gave them more rope. Every morning, they took turns performing their version of loving family. Vanessa would make breakfast. Nothing fancy, just toast and over-buttered scrambled eggs, and beam like she deserved a trophy. Colin, meanwhile, vacuumed the living room twice a week, pausing loudly every few minutes to sigh with the effort. "Cleaning really takes it out of you, huh, Mom?" he'd say, standing heroically with a hand on his hip. I just smiled. "So proud of you." They thought I was weak, old, grateful, naive. But here's the thing. When someone thinks you're soft, they show you their sharpest side without hesitation. It didn't take long for the charade to slip. "Hey, Mom," Colin said one afternoon as I folded laundry in the den. "Just wondering, how's the house transfer paperwork going?" I set down a towel, looked up, and let out a small sigh. "Still working on it. There are more steps than I expected. Bureaucracy, you know." He tried to hide the twitch in his jaw. "Right, yeah, sure. No rush." Vanessa wasn't as subtle. "I mean, we're not trying to pressure you," she said with a sugary smile. "But once it's official, we could really start making the place better for all of us. Paint, floors, maybe even knock out a wall or two." "Of course," I replied, folding another towel. All in good time. Then came the night I couldn't sleep. I was used to waking early, especially with Goofy, my loyal old dog who'd curl up by the foot of the bed and snore like a cartoon character. But that morning, the silence felt wrong. I called for him. No response. Checked the kitchen. His bowl was untouched, his blanket folded. No paw prints by the back door. I went outside barefoot, walking the dew-covered lawn, whispering his name like a prayer. Nothing. That's when I knew. I walked back inside, my breath shallow. Colin and Vanessa were already up, seated at the breakfast table, sipping orange juice and nibbling toast. "Have you seen Goofy?" I asked. Colin barely looked up. "Oh, the dog? Yeah, I took him out early this morning, dropped him somewhere. He was getting in the way." My mouth opened, but no sound came. Vanessa dabbed at her lips with a napkin. "Honestly, Helen, it was overdue. He was old. It's better this way. Peaceful." I didn't answer. I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. I just walked back to my room, shut the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. They had taken everything and felt nothing. Goofy had been with me for 12 years, through Colin's worst gambling phases, through hospital scares, through nights when I felt like I was disappearing. Now, they discarded him like trash. I opened my bedside drawer and pulled out a photo, me holding Goofy as a puppy, both of us beaming like fools. I traced my finger along the edge of the picture. My hand didn't shake. My breathing was even. But inside, something snapped. The old me, mom who forgives everything, who bakes cookies after cruel words, who writes checks instead of drawing lines. That woman was gone. In her place was someone quiet, still, focused, and very, very done. "Sign here, Mother." It was day 12 of their stay when Colin came into the living room holding a manila folder, the kind you only see in bad courtroom dramas, or worse, family betrayals. His expression was casual, but that false humility hung on him like an ill-fitted suit. "Hey, Mom," he said, plopping onto the couch beside me with forced ease. I spoke to a guy at the county office. He said the house title transfer should be super easy." I kept my gaze on the television, letting the news anchor's monotone fill the pause before I responded. "Oh, that's good. So glad you're looking into that." He chuckled nervously. Yeah. So I figured, why not just get it done?" He handed me the folder with a faint flourish. Inside, a printed property transfer agreement, complete with blank signature lines and a notary's sticky note waiting patiently. I blinked at the papers, then at him. "Why now?" I asked. He shrugged. "It just makes sense. I mean, Vanessa and I are living here, paying some bills, helping out, right? Why not put everything in my name? I can handle the taxes, the yard stuff, the legal things. Take some pressure off you." My throat tightened, not from surprise, but from the sheer absurdity of how little they'd thought of me. Just days ago, they'd accidentally gotten rid of Goofy, my only real companion. Now they were handing me a pen like it was a gift and not a dagger. "I'll think about it," I said, handing the folder back. But Colin didn't flinch. "Just sign it, Mom. Don't overthink it. You trust me, don't you?" He smiled that smile, the one he used as a boy when he broke a neighbor's window and swore it was an accident. And so I smiled too. "Of course, sweetheart." I picked up the pen and signed it. Or rather, I signed a version of it. Because what Colin didn't know was that I'd had a replica made, near identical to the real property transfer form, but legally toothless, decorative. A beautiful fiction printed on expensive paper. He beamed. "Thanks, Mom. Seriously, you won't regret it." But I already had, years ago. That evening, Vanessa poured me tea. "Just so you know," she said with syrupy sweetness, "Colin and I are going to look at nursery colors this weekend. Maybe turn the guest room into something cozy and modern." "Oh, that sounds lovely," I said, taking a sip. "Don't forget to check the lead content in the paint, dear. Babies are sensitive." She smiled tightly, clearly unamused. Over the next few days, they made themselves even more at home. Colin moved my office supplies to the garage and replaced my computer desk with the gaming setup. Vanessa ordered new drapes and swapped out my tea sets for sleek glass mugs she found on some influencer's blog. Every change was for the baby I was now certain didn't exist. One night, while they were out shopping for cribs, I opened their laptop, not out of curiosity, but because I already knew what I'd find. Dozens of tabs, articles titled "Fastest Way to Liquidate Real Estate Inheritance," "Legal Loopholes for Property Rights After Parent Dies," "How to Create Accidental Falls," "Hiking Safety Myths Debunked," and the big one bookmarked, "High-Value Life Insurance Policies for Elderly Dependents." They'd left it open, unlocked. Was it arrogance or carelessness? Did it even matter? I printed a few screenshots, folded them, slipped them into my robe pocket. Then I closed the laptop gently, as if tucking a sleeping snake back into its tank. The next morning, I served lemon pancakes with vanilla syrup and sliced strawberries. "Oh my God, Mom, you're like a five-star chef lately." I smiled, just doing my part for the family. Vanessa nodded. "With the house taken care of and the baby on the way, I think we're finally building something beautiful." I let out a soft laugh. Exactly. Later that week, I visited my attorney. "Everything you gave them was fake," he confirmed, scanning the duplicate documents I'd signed. "But they think it's real," I said. He nodded. "And as long as you don't change your will or sign anything else, you're safe. Do you want to press charges?" "Not yet." He raised an eyebrow. "I'm not done watching the show." Back at home, Vanessa's helpfulness intensified. She began giving me unsolicited health advice, low-sodium diets, supplements, gentle exercise suggestions. Colin installed a new water filter, claiming my old one might have had contaminants. Every kindness had teeth. I took the vitamins, drank the filtered water, ate the home-cooked meals she offered. But only when they were watching. When they weren't, I flushed the pills, tossed the tea, replaced the food. They weren't the only ones playing long games. I spent evenings reading old journals, reminding myself who I had once been. There were entries from when Colin was small, scribbled words of worry, of hope. "He's kind today. He kissed my cheek before school." Another years later, "He stole from my wallet again, but apologized." Over and over, the pattern played out. And still, I loved him. Still, I clung to him. Because I thought that's what mothers do. But maybe it's not. Maybe mothers, real mothers, don't just give. Maybe they teach. Maybe they protect what's theirs, even when it means protecting it from their own child. That night, I fell asleep with the old journals curled against my chest, and I dreamed of nothing at all. Just silence and the scent of strawberries and lemon. Goofy is gone. The morning started quietly enough. The sunlight filtered through the blinds in calm stripes, and for a brief moment, I let myself believe it was going to be a good day. But when I swung my legs over the side of the bed, I instantly knew something was wrong. Goofy wasn't there. Every morning for the last 12 years, he had been my wake-up call. either a cold nose against my foot or the rhythmic thump of his tail against the hardwood floor. He was more reliable than any alarm clock. "Goofy," I called out, my voice rising just enough to carry through the house. No scampering paws, no distant jingling collar. I tried not to panic. Maybe he was curled up on the back porch, or sleeping in his favorite sunspot near the dining room. Maybe I had closed the door and trapped him in a room. I checked them all. Kitchen, bathroom, laundry room, upstairs guest room, even the storage closet under the stairs. Nothing. By now, my heart was pounding. I threw on a robe and stepped outside barefoot, the dew soaking instantly through the thin fabric. "Goofy?" I called again, scanning the yard, my garden beds, the path that led to the mailbox. "Goofy, come!" Silence. And then, in the doorway behind me, I heard footsteps. Colin, chewing on a slice of toast like he hadn't a care in the world. "Oh," he said nonchalantly, "if you're looking for the dog, I got rid of him." The words didn't make sense. "What?" "Goofy," he repeated, taking another bite. "I drove him out to some field and left him. He'll probably find a barn or a ditch or whatever dogs do. You're welcome." I stared at him, mouth open. My legs felt like they might give out from under me. You dumped him?" Colin shrugged. "He was annoying, always underfoot, always barking at night. You're old, Mom. You shouldn't be dealing with pets at your age. I did you a favor." A favor. He thought taking away the one creature that loved me unconditionally was a favor. Vanessa walked in behind him, stretching and yawning. "Oh, you told her? Good. I mean, come on, Helen. He was shedding everywhere. The furniture reeked." I stood there barefoot in the cold morning light, heart cracking in ways I didn't know were possible. That dog had been there through everything. My husband's betrayal, Colin's rebellious years, the cancer scare. Goofy never judged me, never abandoned me. He just curled up beside me and listened. And now, he was gone. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel grief. Not in the way I expected. I felt rage. But not the loud, fire-breathing kind. No. This was the cold, quiet kind. The kind that hardens into resolve. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat in Goofy's corner of the living room, surrounded by his toys, his folded blanket, his empty bowl. I played a voicemail I'd saved from years ago, one where Goofy barked in the background as Colin left me a birthday message. "Love you, Mom." His younger voice said brightly, "What happened to that boy? Was he ever real? Did I raise a monster, or did I just feed one until it grew too big to hide?" The next morning, I began phase 2 of my plan. I started with dinner. Macaroni and cheese, Colin's favorite, but I used extra butter, extra salt, and a sprinkle of MSG I'd kept for years in the back of the spice drawer. Not enough to harm, just enough to fog. Vanessa loved rich food, so I made her a creamy pumpkin bisque with heavy cream, fried croutons, and a dash of something relaxing. They devoured it. "Mom," Colin said between bites. "You're spoiling us." "Oh, you know me," I said sweetly, ladling more into his bowl. "Just want my babies fed and happy." Every day after that, I cooked. Duck confit, baked risotto, buttery mashed potatoes, deep-fried chicken bites with spicy aioli, all rich, all indulgent, all slow poison. Not literal poison, mind you, but the kind that lulls predators into sleep. They started sleeping longer, napping during the day, getting irritable. Perfect. They were finally settling in, letting their guard down. Exactly what I needed. One afternoon, Vanessa handed me a notebook. "What's this?" I asked, flipping it open. "Just some ideas," she said, smiling that practiced smile. "How we might renovate the house. If we knock down this wall, we could expand the kitchen, maybe a second bathroom upstairs." I nodded, listening. "Of course," she added, tapping a page, "once it's officially in Colin's name, we can refinance. Maybe pull some equity." "Ah," I said, running a finger down the page. "So you're planning to gut it?" She laughed. "It's an investment. You'll benefit too." I smiled. I wanted to say, "Sweetheart, if this were a horror movie, you'd be the first to trip over your own ego and get dragged off screen." But I just nodded again. "Let me make you some chamomile tea," I said instead. She sighed. "You're the best." She had no idea. That night, I cleaned Goofy's bowl one last time, folded his blanket, packed away his toys, and with trembling hands, I lit a small candle beside his photo. "I miss you, but I promise they'll never hurt anyone again. Not like they did you. Not like they did me." The candle flickered gently, almost like it agreed. Smiles, soup, and slow poison. The next morning, the kitchen was alive with the comforting sounds of chopping, sizzling, and the low hum of classical music floating from the old radio by the window. It was almost laughable how easily they had slipped into the routine of being waited on. Colin sat at the breakfast table scrolling through his phone while Vanessa lounged nearby in an oversized cardigan she'd probably stolen from my closet. "Smells amazing," she chirped, not even bothering to look up. "It's French onion soup today," I replied, carefully caramelizing the onions in butter. "But I'd make a family favorite." Colin grunted in approval. "Make sure it's extra cheesy." "Of course." It's funny how people assume comfort food equals love. They never think to question what's inside. Never imagine the meticulous choices that go into building a meal designed not to nourish, but to pacify. Over the past few days, I'd created a menu so perfectly indulgent, so lovingly over the top, that they never even paused to consider what was happening to their bodies. Everything I served was laden with saturated fats, refined sugars, and enough sodium to sink a ship. Their minds were fogging, their reactions slowing, just like I planned. I knew their vices better than anyone. Colin always reached for seconds. Always. He was the kind of man who believed leftovers were a personal insult. Vanessa? She prided herself on her refined palate, but couldn't resist anything truffle-infused or drenched in cream. So, I gave them what they wanted. Twice baked potatoes, stuffed with sour cream and bacon bits, heavy stews slow-cooked in bone marrow, chicken pot pie with the crust so rich it crumbled under the fork like shortbread. And each night, I watched them grow more sluggish, more irritable. They couldn't see the shift happening, but I could. I noticed how Colin now rubbed his temples after meals, or how Vanessa winced every time she stood up too quickly. I wasn't trying to kill them, but I was absolutely trying to weaken them. One evening, after polishing off 3 servings of lasagna, Colin leaned back in his chair and sighed. Man, Mom, I don't know what's gotten into you lately, but you're cooking like it's Thanksgiving every night. I smiled sweetly as I cleared his plate. Just happy to have you home, sweetheart. Yeah, he mumbled as he scrolled through his phone again. By the way, Vanessa and I were talking. You should really think about retirement. You've done enough. Retirement? From what? Cooking? Cleaning? Keeping the house together while they played king and queen? I nodded, playing along. You're probably right. Vanessa appeared in the doorway with a half-eaten macaron in hand. Also, Helen, I was thinking, we should host a brunch next week. Just a small thing. Some of Colin's friends from the firm. You know, to show off the new home. The way she said home made me want to laugh out loud. I folded the dish towel in my hand and placed it gently on the counter. That sounds lovely, I said, turning toward her. Would you like me to prepare the menu? Oh, yes. Let's do something rustic, trendy, like a duck hash with poached eggs. Of course. Rustic and trendy. That's what they wanted. I'd give them rustic. I'd give them everything. Later that night, as they slept, I sat alone at the kitchen table with a pen and notebook, mapping out the next phase. The food had done its job. Now it was time to shift tactics. Fatigue was setting in, not just physically, but mentally. Colin had started forgetting small things. His charger, his wallet, the name of the client he was trying to impress. Vanessa was getting moodier, snapping at him over crumbs on the counter or misplaced earrings. Their unity was cracking. All I had to do was keep pressing. A well-timed compliment here, a perfectly cooked dish there. A little competition, a little jealousy. Nothing overt, just subtle reminders that they were each other's obstacle, not me. I set the notebook aside and got up to check on them. Their bedroom door was slightly ajar. Colin snored softly while Vanessa slept facing the wall, her breathing sharp and irregular. On the dresser sat a glass of wine, still half full, lipstick mark on the rim. I stared at them for a long time. There was no satisfaction yet, no triumph. Just a quiet promise forming at the base of my spine. Soon. The next morning, Vanessa woke up nauseous. Probably just a bug, I offered gently, placing a cool hand on her forehead. She winced. It's probably that duck confit. I told you it was too rich. Oh, I'm sorry, dear. I'll make something light today. Good. Something with ginger and no salt. Of course, I nodded. Then I went into the kitchen and made her favorite, pumpkin soup with coconut cream and nutmeg, exactly the way she liked it. Except this time, I added a whisper of valerian root extract, perfectly legal, perfectly harmless in small doses, and just enough to keep her feeling a step behind. As she drank it down with a satisfied sigh, I knew we were nearing the peak. They had no idea how high up they were, and they had no clue I'd already greased the slope on the other side. A hike to nowhere. Vanessa was practically glowing that morning. Nature therapy, she said, zipping up her neon hyping jacket like we were starring in an influence video. We all need a reset, a breath of fresh air. Colin followed behind her, slightly less enthusiastic but still playing his part. Thought it'd be good to get you outside, Mom. something different. I watched them, coffee in hand, standing by the front door like two amateur actors auditioning for a wholesome family ad. Except I already knew how this scene ended. Spoiler, it wasn't with a picnic. Oh, how thoughtful, I smiled, lacing up my worn boots, the same ones I'd used during mountain rescue drills in my hiking club days. Let me just grab my jacket. Truth was, I didn't need the jacket. I needed time. Time to double-check the tiny packets tucked into my backpack. The same packets I quietly prepared using their own sedatives. Vanessa's stash, conveniently hidden behind her fake prenatal vitamins. They'd hoped to make me sleep forever. But I had other plans. The drive to the trailhead was long and winding. The city gave way to rolling hills, then dense pine forests that swallowed the sunlight. Colin hummed softly to the radio while Vanessa fiddled with her water bottle. I stayed silent, watching the trees blur past, feeling the tension in the car rise like steam. When we finally pulled into the lot near the base of Sable Ridge, the air had shifted. Too still, too quiet. This wasn't a place for casual strolls or Instagram photos. People came here to disappear. They just didn't realize it would be them. We hiked for over an hour, winding up a narrow trail that grew steeper with every step. Colin was sweating more than he should have been. Vanessa had stopped 3 times to retie her shoes. Here, Colin said finally, stopping at a scenic overlook. The valley below stretched wide and empty, framed by craggy cliffs. Perfect spot to rest. He pulled a bottle from his backpack and handed it to me. Electrolytes. It'll help you keep going. Thank you, I said, smiling, as I took the drink. I raised it to my lips, but didn't swallow. I tilted my head, pretended to sip, then lowered it with a grateful nod. They both watched closely. I saw it in their eyes, the flicker of relief, like something had just checked off their to-do list. Vanessa handed me an energy bar. Thought you might be hungry too. Oh, you two are spoiling me. They laughed. I laughed. Then I handed them matching bars from my own backpack. Here, I brought these. My favorite flavor. You should try them. They didn't hesitate. Ripped the wrappers open like kids at a vending machine. Gobbled them down in 2 bites. I turned and walked toward a rock near the overlook. Sat down. Waited. 20 minutes later, it started. Vanessa stood up too quickly and stumbled. Her eyes fluttered. Whoa, that's weird. Colin groaned, swaying slightly. My head, what the? I collapsed, slowly to the ground, carefully, as if succumbing to the effects of the drink I never touched. I kept my breathing shallow, still, eyes closed. Right on cue. Did it work? Vanessa whispered. I think so, Colin muttered, kneeling next to me. She's out. Their footsteps rustled as they moved closer. I felt them tugging on my arms, trying to lift me. She's heavier than I thought. Just drag her. We don't need to go far. The edge is right there. I waited. Let them pull. Then I opened my eyes. Vanessa screamed. Colin froze. What the? Feeling tired? I asked sweetly, sitting up and brushing dirt from my sleeves. Maybe you should rest. Their legs gave out almost simultaneously. The sedatives were fast-acting, but just slow enough to let them realize what was happening. What did you do? Colin gasped, trying to crawl away. I fed you exactly what you planned to feed me, I said softly. You just didn't check your own ingredients. Vanessa's limbs trembled as she struggled to sit up. You psycho! I'm a mother, I corrected, rising to my feet. One who's done being manipulated. They collapsed fully, the forest swallowing their moans. I didn't leave them to die. That was never the point. I knew the temperature would drop fast after sundown. I knew there were wild animals and that help wouldn't come quickly in such a remote place. But I also knew they'd survive, just barely. A lectin etched into every bruise and bug bite. By the time I reached the parking lot and got into my car, the sun was low, casting long shadows across the trailhead. I sat behind the wheel for a long time, breathing deeply, letting the silence wrap around me like a familiar blanket. Then I drove home. That night, I changed the sheets, vacuumed the hall, watered the plants. Every motion calm, steady, like I'd been waiting my whole life to reclaim this quiet. It wasn't victory I felt. It was peace. Not because they suffered, but because I didn't. The man in the forest. I didn't expect to find anyone else in those woods that day. But life, real life, not the fantasy my son cooked up with his twisted plans, has a funny way of placing people exactly where you need them. It was on the walk back down the ridge, just past the bend where the pine trees grew so thick the sun barely touched the ground, that I heard it. A faint, broken sound, like a moan. Not quite human, but not quite animal either. I paused, tilted my head. There it was again. Low, ragged, desperate. My first instinct, embarrassingly enough, was to keep walking. I'd had enough of other people's problems. But the second instinct, the one you don't talk about at parties, the one carved into your bones when you spent a lifetime cleaning up after others, that one pulled me off the trail. Hello? I called softly, pushing through the underbrush. Is someone there? A voice replied, barely more than a whisper. Here, please. 10 paces in, I saw him. A man, sprawled beneath a twisted oak, his leg clearly broken and his shirt soaked in blood. Not fresh, but the kind that told me he'd been there overnight. His face was pale, eyes fluttering open and shut, like he couldn't decide which world to stay in. I knelt beside him, checking for other wounds. What happened? Fell, slipped, couldn't move, no signal. I pulled out my phone, one bar, miracle of miracles. I dialed emergency services, explained everything, and gave them coordinates from the trail map app I always carried. While we waited, I stayed beside him, folding my jacket under his head, murmuring simple things to keep him awake. I said, "My name's Helen. You're going to be okay." He smiled faintly. "Leonard." "Nice to meet you, Leonard," I replied, like we weren't crouched in dirt and pine needles, surrounded by the kind of silence only broken branches can make. He grimaced as another spasm of pain passed through him. "You hike alone?" I nodded. "These days, I do most things alone." "Smart woman," he said, closing his eyes again. At the hospital, I waited. They offered to send me home, but something in me said no. I stayed in that beige waiting room with the broken coffee machine and old magazines. It was quiet, clean, honest. A nurse came out after a while. "She's stable. Would you like to see her?" Leonard's room was warm and full of machines that beeped politely. He looked better already. Pale, sure, but alert.
"You stayed," he said softly. "I don't leave people who need help," I answered. "Not anymore. Not unless they shove me out first." He laughed, then winced. "You're sharp. You'd be surprised what you learn cleaning up other people's messes for 30 years. Leonard reached out slowly, offered a hand. I hesitated, just for a second, then took it. His grip was firm, steady, real. "I run a firm," he said after a pause. "Construction, energy, acquisitions. Graham Group." The name hit me like a wind across an old scar. "Graham Group," I repeated slowly. "Colin, my son, he's been chasing your company for months, pitching projects, always talking about landing a deal with you." Leonard blinked. "Dawson? Colin Dawson?" I nodded. His face changed, just a flicker. Not anger, not disgust, but something that said, "Noted." "Well," he said, voice smooth, "then I owe your son a thank you." "For what?" "For having a mother who actually saves lives." I didn't tell Leonard the truth. Not then. Not about the house, not about the insurance plan, not about the dog or the sedatives or the cold hike I had only just returned from. Some things needed time. He asked if he could call me again. I gave him my number. Then I went home. The house was quiet. Still smelled faintly of the soup I made 2 nights before. Goofy's old squeaky toy still sat by the door. I didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, I made tea. For the first time in months, I poured only 1 cup. And I sat at the table, letting the warmth fill my hands and chase the chill away. The next day, Leonard called. "I have your coat," he said. "You left it on the trail." I smiled at the phone. Maybe I did. Or maybe I just needed a reason to hear from you again. His silence lasted just long enough to become tender. "Then I'll bring it by." The locks change while they vacation. Cullen was always predictable. Too predictable. So when he called me from the airport in Bangkok, just minutes after landing, I was already holding the receipt for the courier service I had just hired to remove every trace of him and Vanessa from my home. "Colin," he said with forced cheer, "everything's so expensive here. Can you send us a little more? I promise we'll bring you back something nice." I could hear the clinking of glasses in the background, laughter, the unmistakable sound of people who thought they'd won. "Of course, sweetheart," I said sweetly. "If it's not enough, just let me know." What I didn't say was that every cent was going on his credit card, not mine. See, months ago, I had quietly gained access to Cullen's accounts under the guise of helping him manage his finances. It wasn't hard. He practically handed over his passwords. I simply linked a separate line of credit in his name and let him do what he always did: overspend. All I did was remove the safety net. While they sipped cocktails and posed on beaches, I emptied their closets. Clothes, shoes, knickknacks from their wedding registry, every last item they'd brought into my house, I packed up and shipped to the local community center. Even the gold-plated vanity mirror Vanessa insisted matched the aesthetic of my guest room. The cleaning service I hired was thorough. Bleached the baseboards, steam-cleaned the rugs, repainted the guest room walls. I instructed the locksmith to change all 3 locks and to triple secure the side gate. I left the house exactly the way I liked it: simple, clean, quiet. Mine. Then I sat down at the dining table and printed a full invoice, itemized to the cent, of every charge made on that trip: airfare, hotel, spa days, designer bags. It came out to just over $27,000. I sent it by email with the subject line, Debt statement. Due upon return. An hour later, my phone rang. "What the hell is this?" Cullen's voice was sharp, his panic thinly veiled by aggression. "The money you spent," I said gently. "It's yours to repay." "You're joking, right? I'm your son. Isn't it normal for me to spend your money?" I leaned back, sipping tea. "Really? You still remember I'm your mother. Funny how that only happens when you need something." He fell silent for a beat. Then, shouting, "You let us use the money. This is entrapment. You—" I hung up. I didn't bother with his next 10 calls. Instead, I lit a scented candle, lavender and rosemary, and started a new book Leonard had mailed me. A cozy little crime novel set in the English countryside. The kind where the villain always gets caught. The kind with justice. When Colin and Vanessa returned, it was pouring rain. I watched through the peephole as they stood at the door, soaked and furious. The pounding began. "Mom!" Colin shouted. "Open up, you hear me?" Vanessa's voice followed, shrill and shaking. "Is this your way of cutting us off? What kind of mother abandons her own family?" I opened the door just enough to block the entrance with my body, my face calm, my tone even. "Excuse me? What do you think you're doing?" Colin shoved the folder I had sent him against my chest. "You gave us this house. You said it was ours." I raised an eyebrow. "Did you read the last line on the contract? The very last?" Vanessa grabbed the folder, flipping through the pages with trembling fingers. Her voice broke. "It says, 'For display purposes only, not a legally binding document.'" I tilted my head. So you can read." "You tricked us," she shrieked. "No," I said, stepping back. "You lied to me. You drugged me. You tried to kill me for insurance money. I just adjusted the ending." Colin's face twisted with rage. "I'm your son. How could you do this to me?" And that's when I handed him the envelope, the last one. "This is a paternity test," I said, my voice almost a whisper. He stared at it. "You're not biologically mine, Colin. Your real mother was the woman who destroyed my first marriage. She had you and vanished. Your father begged me to take you in. I did. I raised you like my own. And what did you do?" He didn't respond, just collapsed onto the doorstep like the wind had been knocked out of him. Vanessa looked at me, eyes wide with disbelief. "Wait, you knew all along? And you still raised him?" I nodded. "I gave him everything I had. A name, a home, an education, love, and he repaid me with betrayal." They didn't speak, so I said one last thing before shutting the door. "About that little hike, I never touched the drink. You were the ones who took your own medicine. I just adjusted the ending." Then I closed the door, quietly. And this time, I didn't look back. The doctor's note. It was Vanessa who first complained about the chest pains. "I think it's just stress," she mumbled one evening, hand pressed to her rib cage. "Maybe acid reflux, all that heavy food." Colin waved her off. "You always overthink everything." But I noticed how pale she looked, how her steps were slower than usual, how her appetite had dulled. She didn't ask for seconds anymore. She barely touched dessert. Colin followed suit a few days later. "I've been so tired lately," he muttered, rubbing his temples. "My back aches, and I've had like 4 nosebleeds this week." I didn't blink. just refilled his glass with cucumber water and placed a warm compress beside his elbow. "You've both been working too hard," I said softly. "Let me take care of you." They nodded, grateful, exhausted, gullible. I'd kept feeding them, rich, comforting meals laced with subtle disorientation. Oversalted broth, hidden sugars, obscene amounts of saturated fat. All perfectly legal, all perfectly ordinary. Just relentless. It was Colin who first insisted on going to the clinic. I offered to drive. He said no. But he came back with worry all over his face, crumpled paperwork in hand, Vanessa at his side. High blood pressure, vitamin deficiency, liver functions a little off. Doctor says I need to change my diet immediately. Vanessa chimed in, holding her own printout. "And me? He says my iron is tanking. I'm at risk for anemia." I tilted my head. "Oh dear, I wonder what could be causing that." They looked at me, really looked at me, and for a split second, I saw the suspicion. Flickering, brief, but there. Then gone. Because in their minds, I was still Mom. Sweet, doting, clueless Mom. They started making their own meals after that. Boiled vegetables, plain rice, grilled chicken breasts so dry they flaked into dust. I watched, amused, as they set aside the dinners I made, wrapped them in foil, and stuffed them in the back of the fridge. They thought they were being clever. They didn't realize that the food had just been a tool. The real work was already done. They were isolated, paranoid, sluggish, too tired to fight, too fogged to think clearly, and best of all, too embarrassed to tell anyone what was happening. What could they say? My mother is slowly making me sick with casseroles. They knew how ridiculous it sounded. They knew no one would believe them. One morning, Colin stood at the foot of the stairs, suitcase in hand. "We're going to take a break," he said, his voice hollow. "Vanessa's cousin offered us a room for a while." I didn't answer. Just walked over, took the suitcase gently, and rolled it back into the hallway. "What?" he said, eyes narrowing. I smiled. "This is my house. You don't get to leave until I say so." He scoffed. "You can't keep us here." "Can't I?" Vanessa appeared behind him, pale and trembling. "What's wrong with you?" "You poisoned us," Colin hissed. I shook my head, amused. "I fed you. You poisoned yourselves." He lunged forward, hand raised like he was about to strike, then stopped. Because he couldn't. Because his limbs weren't strong enough anymore. I leaned close, so close I could see the panic behind his pupils. "If you try to leave, I'll call the hospital. I'll say you've been having hallucinations, confused episodes. You've already got the blood work to support it, don't you?" They didn't move. They didn't breathe. "You made me into your retirement plan," I said, voice calm. "You pretended to be pregnant. You faked supplements. You abandoned my dog. And you thought I'd thank you with a deed and a signature?" I took a step back. "Well, congratulations. You're staying indefinitely." They didn't try to leave again. They didn't call the police because they knew, deep down, they wouldn't be believed. Not over the woman who donated to the local shelter, who volunteered at the library, who sent Christmas cards to the mailman, and always remembered to smile at the checkout line. No, no one would believe them. And now they didn't even believe themselves. That night, I prepared something simple: tomato soup and grilled cheese. They didn't eat it, but I did. Every bite. And I smiled through the whole thing. The Last Supper. It was the quiet that told me it was over. Not a slammed door, not a fight, not even an apology. Just the slow, suffocating silence of two people who realized they lost. Completely. Utterly. Vanessa stopped curling her hair. Colin stopped pretending to vacuum. They no longer asked about the deed or the paperwork or the nursery theme they'd picked out for a baby that never existed. They simply moved through the house like ghosts, pale and deflated. And I began to live again. I planted herbs in the kitchen window. I dusted off my old watercolors. I walked Goofy's favorite route every morning, even though he was gone. Sometimes I imagined him there beside me, still loyal, still mine. One evening, as twilight spilled gold across the kitchen tiles, I made dinner one last time. Real food. Nothing laced, nothing rich or heavy, just lemon-roasted chicken with rosemary, wild rice, and sautéed green beans. It smelled like peace. I called them to the table. They came, heads low, eyes wary. "I know what you think of me," I said, placing the dishes down gently. "I know you think I'm cruel, that I wanted revenge, but you're wrong." They didn't speak. I sat down across from them. "This is the last meal I'll make for you. After this, you leave." Colin's eyes lifted slightly. "You mean it?" I nodded. He looked at Vanessa. She looked at her plate. "Why now?" she asked, barely above a whisper. "Because keeping you here meant I was still part of your story, and I don't want to be anymore." They ate in silence, and for the first time in weeks, I ate too. Every bite was warm, gentle, clean, like closure. The next morning, they were gone. No goodbye, no note, just an empty guest room and the faintest trace of perfume in the hallway. I didn't clean it. I shut the door and let it fade on its own. Months passed. Spring arrived with daffodils and soft rain. I took up yoga, repainted the living room, adopted a new dog, an old mutt with floppy ears and a quiet soul who didn't need much, just a warm place to lie down and someone to sit beside. Sometimes I thought about Colin. Not with anger, not anymore. Just a soft ache, like the echo of a song you used to love before you knew the lyrics were hollow. One day, I received a letter, handwritten, no return address. "Mom, we're sorry. We don't expect forgiveness, but we know now. We know what we became, and it's not who we want to be. We hope you're happy. You deserve to be." It wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. I folded it carefully and placed it in the back of my drawer. Not because I believed them, but because it was the first thing they gave me that wasn't stolen. That evening, I made tea. Just one cup. sat on the porch with the dog at my feet, the sky turning lavender above me, and thought, not of the pain or the betrayal or the games, but of how good it felt to be alone and free. Sometimes healing isn't loud. Sometimes it's just choosing yourself quietly, completely, and without apology.